Austin Faith Dialogue at the Crossroads of Religion and Life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interactions with the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Area Interreligious Ministries in cooperation with KNVA. Join us now for Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you're here this week for Austin Faith Dialogue. Thank you for joining us. And you may remember that a few weeks ago, we took our first step into talking about the world of tattoo art and artistry. So we're taking a next step with today's show. We have as a guest, once again, Christina Hyatt, an independent curator. Thank you for being here.
That's great.
And Joyce DeBona, you're an artist, and you were one of the artists featured in the show, right?
I was.
So good to have you here.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here.
And since we did part one, Christina, I know that you won an Austin Critics Table Award. So tell us what it was for, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. The Austin Critics Award, through mainly the Chronicle and the Statesman, the writers, it was for the Best Curated Group Show, and very, very proud. Everyone involved. I was very humbled to win it, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without the fine art that the show had. So yeah, it was great.
And that brought some good attention to the particular show, which was the one on celebrated skin.
Correct.
Last fall, right?
Yes, definitely.
So this time, when we do Austin Faith Dialogue today, we're talking with one of the artists. So go ahead and introduce us to Joyce and her place in the whole celebrated skin show.
Yes, in fact, I was able to meet Joyce DeBona while I was doing research for the show, and I came across her work, and as she's a painter and a sculptor. And so I really wanted to branch out and find some more traditional artists, not just tattoo artists. And when I saw the pieces in her studio, I was blown away. And I know we'll get to see those later in the segment.
So Joyce, tell us a little bit about your approach to art, knowing that the people who are watching the show are people of faith, and they're always interested in people's journeys to where they are.
Well, I had been doing three-dimensional painting around human forms for some time, and the tattoo work really gave me the opportunity to bring literary elements and visual elements together. And because there were literary elements, I was able to create concepts from historical, philosophical, spiritual thought, and put them in a visual three-dimensional medium, which led me to the tattoo work.
Why tattoos? What was so intriguing to you about this particular art form?
The body politic. That it's an opportunity to make a very, very personal statement on our own skin, and in this case, for me as an artist, to represent that in a sculptural and visual medium. And
you had, as I recall, a mentor, as it were,
I did.
As you were taking this journey?
I had a mentor and an introduction to the art form in the form of poet Raul Salinas, who was doing a series on Chicano prison art. Now, as a white woman, that is not something that I would have just said that I was going to do. Under his mentorship, I became educated to something that otherwise I would have been completely unaware of. And I was given literally volumes of documentation, so that I developed a library of iconography. And then once I had this library, I kind of creatively unleashed on this tattoo piece, and ended up with my first piece, which is Pentagraphs, which is pen and ink around a three-dimensional form. That has to do specifically with Chicano prison art, with Raul's poetry interlaced through the piece.
And we'll take a look at that in just a minute, but I'd be interested to know, Christina, what was it that drew you to Joyce's work in particular, as I suppose you could have chosen from a number of things for Celebrated Skin. Why Joyce?
Well, because of the history that she uses, and specifically the iconography, and I wanted to cover a broad scope in the tattoo show. There's so many different genres, there's thousands of years of history, and Joyce specifically took part of that history, and in a contemporary narrative with Raul Salinas, she transformed his poetry into a visual dialogue, and she put it onto sculpture which I had never seen. Yes, we had photography of people with tattoos on their skin, but never in a formal sculptural sense, as far as the fine art world goes. And when I saw the piece, the imagery was overlaced, and your eye just kept moving around it, and it really brought everything full circle. And so I really enjoyed the formal qualities and then the narrative qualities that her work put into the piece. And it was so very different from any of the other works.
That's what I remember from the show. And now I hope we've whetted people's interest enough. Let's take a look then at the first piece. Tell us how you got to this particular piece, Joyce.
I think that when I made this piece, I really got a sense of the heart and the emotion and the spirit of what the people that put these tattoos on their skin in prison were going through. I did not do it in a cavalier fashion. I studied for many, many months before I ever began the actual pen and ink work on the sculpture. And as I did it, I realized that this is something that was deeply, deeply personal. And certainly Catholicism and indigenous and the actual body politic of struggles and controversy in society came into meaning with what they put on their skin. The Virgin Mary and the Christ are two iconic, huge figures that turn up over and over and over again. And I wanted to combine these two in a relationship that was very close and personal. So rather than making them separate from one another, I made them in connection, intimately. The Christ overshadowing the Virgin, and then the Mexica on the bottom, like a declaration of independence.
And does it mean anything that this is just a partial form? We don't see legs, we don't really see arms.
I think that I was kind of referencing the classical.
Well,
you know,
that's what I loved about the piece.
Like the Greek class, yes, right. Certainly. And I intentionally wanted to do that, and I wanted to take this very, very contemporary, but at the same time referenced in ancient indigena. And I wanted to kind of validate it in a certain way in doing that. And I think I did it okay.
I really like the gestural quality of the piece too. There's an idea of formal sculpture and it being in a pose, and the way that the gesture speaks to just the audience, and the fact that his arms are outstretched. It's a proud stance.
That's right. Yes.
And so that really, I feel that even spoke not only with the vision, the imagery, but when you walk around this piece, at once it seems like he's stretching, but it's also a commanding pose, and you see the structure of the back, and there's so much just in the form of the human body, the study of the human body, which goes back, to the dawn of time. But you're able to see how the imagery wraps around the body and how it accentuates. And I think tattoo artists, they really take that into consideration in their art form.
As opposed to artists working on flat
canvas.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, in this case, Joyce, this particular piece was your first of two, and we'll get to the second one after a while. What happened as you were doing this as a first piece in your own spiritual journey?
I think it was a journey of empathy, compassion, discovery. I think that oftentimes where there is much oppression, there is paradoxically much liberation, spiritually or otherwise. And I think that I began to develop a real sense of the pride, that came through the struggle of oppression, of conflict, of coming to terms with classism and one's own spiritual roots. I mean, in a way, I almost felt like I was channeling, you know, because I had so much input, I had so much information. And as an artist, at a certain point, I was able to set aside my own and go with it.
Why do you suppose that Raul Salinas picked you to do this piece? You, a white woman outside the culture, no tattoos yourself. Why do you suppose he picked you to do this kind of work?
He had seen some of my work. I had been doing three-dimensional painting that was of more of a kind of a cosmic type of format, and full color around mannequins and full human forms. And I think that he also sensed a kindred spirit, you know, or we never would have engaged in that sort of work to begin with. I believe very, very strongly that the indigenous peoples of the world have much to teach us. And that in contemporary times, much of their spiritual wealth and lessons, and some of it we're seeing environmentally currently, has been dismissed as being either primitive or childlike or unimportant. And I think that he saw that I recognized the worth of it, and that's why.
And Christina, as the curator, what kind of reactions did you hear to this particular piece?
Well, even the day we were installing the work, it's a public gallery, so people were coming in and out, and we had small children just exclaim, "Wow, what is that? Mom, what's going on? What is this work?" We had people coming up asking who the artist was and what was the show about, and we even had a group of the Daugherty Art Center hosts lots of civic meetings, and we had a group of Austin police officials who were there, and they were having a meeting, and they came up to me and said, "Who did this work? This is amazing." And they recognized a lot of the iconography, and they were telling stories. So the fact that the pieces, yes, they touched on all of the formal aspects that we just talked about, they had an immediate connection with the community, with everyday people coming in and seeing it, and then that spurred other dialogue, which was wonderful. And that was even before the show opened. And we continually were able to have stories being told, and people whose cousin had a Lady of Guadalupe or a Virgin Mary, and it spurred a whole conversation. And I think that's the point of any art, is to engage and to learn from and to share.
We can share our journeys. And
That's right.
I know there was an interesting journey with the second figure, which we'll get to in the second part of the show, the female figure. So thank you both for being here so far. And we thank you for joining us on this first half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be right back. We're glad you're back for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue, where we're having a lively conversation now, the second of, I hope, several shows, talking about the art and artistry of tattoos. It's so good to have you here, Christina and Joyce. Thank you so much. Now, in the first half of the show, we talked about your first piece in this Celebrated Skin show. The second half, we're going to talk about the second piece you had, but I don't want to forget that we should mention again what it is that you did last fall, Christina. And I know you brought the catalog from the show along, so be sure to let us take a look at that.
Sure. Celebrated Skin, Tattoo Art and Artists from Austin, Texas. Sorry to cover up. And I really wanted the show to continue on. It has, in so many ways, so many unexpected ways. But the catalog shows Richard Bryant's photography, which he did a phenomenal job. And it shows other photographers, other tattoo artists, sculptors, painters, and it's available online. And we have a website, celebratedskin.com. And as the show continues to grow and have more interest, Tattoos for Men actually covered the work, and very happy that we were on the cover. And it has beautiful reproductions, many of the images that are also in the catalog. And this is available on many newsstands. So we were very proud to have that.
Glad to do a commercial, because I think many of us are finding out that tattoo art and artistry really is a place where more of us can meet.
Right.
That folks who have tattoos are not just those who we might say are on the fringes of society, or tattoo artistry is not just something that someone does on the side, but this is really much deeper and much richer than many of us would have thought.
Exactly.
And especially I think when we get to the second piece that you did, the second piece of art that was in Celebrated Skin. So tell us how you got to this second piece, Joyce.
That was a highly personal piece. After doing the first piece, I felt the desire to take the tools and use my own personal iconography. And it is about my spiritual journey. It is about referencing my ancestors, my influences, my evolution spiritually, as an artist and as a human being. And so it really felt like a dance. I did not have to think about this piece as much as I simply let it unfold. And one thing led to another.
So what do we have on here? Point out some things
Voyage
that
to
people can
consciousness.
notice.
You see the artist's hand. And I think that we all write our own stories. I think we write our own stories in many ways in terms of our lives, how we accept our lives, how we live our lives, the choices that we make, and how we determine or decide that we're going to feel about those choices. I think that we have some free will in that. And in this case, it was a spiritual journey. Only I can liberate myself. I believe that there is a creator, that there is one creator, and that it is my responsibility to liberate myself from the restraints that keep me from being in connection with the Creator, that no one else can do that for me, that I have to do that personally. Allies and Ancestors is paying homage to all those that have gone before me, all those that are recorded in my DNA, my loved ones, ones that maybe on some level I'll never know, but that I sense inside.
Right.
There are a lot of stories within the piece. The indigenous, once again, is heavily referenced. Go ahead.
And I see you did a tree and a bird and a heart. I'm trying to look for some symbols that I can pick out there.
A bear, a dolphin. I think animal totems represent characteristics. They represent spiritual characteristics, characteristics that we may aspire to, or maybe that we have to overcome. And so I referenced those.
And in this case, I know we have photos of both sides of the piece. So this is one side, and then the back side of this particular piece of art. So what do you have here?
Sacrifice. I think all growth requires sacrifice, whether it's the sacrifice of our lower nature, or whether it's maybe a more personal sacrifice at times. And I think we have to willingly, like the Christ did, embrace and engage that sacrifice. And that it's kind of like a flower opening that we can grow from that once we do so. So that concept and the concept of the owl or free flight in conjunction with it, you know, to me this was a way of blending my kind of Christian Western religion with the indigenous. You know, I was somehow able to say, hey, these two things are not separate.
And now you've called this piece Voyage to Consciousness,
Yes.
correct? And the significance of that title?
I think that we're all on a voyage to consciousness at our best. And I think that that unfolds in different ways for different people. And I also think that that's maybe what tattoos have, they're a way of people documenting that journey.
You were the key documentor for many artists, the assembler of this documentation too. So what did you think when you saw this piece, Christina?
When I went into Joyce's studio and I saw these two pieces in the round, immediately you were drawn in by the formal quality of the drawing. They were photoreal, and I thought, how on earth did this, what is this saying, but how was it done, was one of my first questions. And then when Joyce uses, like she says, the animal totems and the iconography, the spiritual symbols, it's an immediate reference to the breadth of tattoo history and how through an animal characteristic, a person can also connect and live through that animal. In the Irizumi style of Japanese tattoos, the dragon, the falcon, the hawk, the seven-tailed phoenix, these are all symbols in which speak of a rite of passage. And that passage can be anything from a life struggle to growing with someone, to loss, to pain, to really becoming who you are and understanding the world around you, but having strength. And I think those images, when they're permanently put onto skin, they become part of you. No matter if someone sees it or not, they're so personal. And most of the time, in various cultures, Chinese and Latino, they aren't for the other person. They're not for a viewer. They're for the self. And when I saw this work, I realized that Joyce knew that. She specifically knew that. And she'd touched on the heart of that. Not being a tattooed person, I felt that that was a very large leap because as a visual artist, we pull from all of this. We pull from history of art, we pull from religion, we pull from contemporary studies, but she really got to the heart of this without having to ever say a word. She did it with images.
And am I correct in understanding that it's only been relatively recently that women have had tattoos perhaps as a rite of passage or to mark something in their life, that up to now tattooing has been primarily a male sphere?
It is predominantly male. When I did the research for the show, and like Joyce, it wasn't something I just, I jumped into, but I really wanted to take the time to learn about the different cultures. So reading about Japanese styles and the Inuit styles and the Mori, where the tattooing is on the neck and the face, it is predominantly male. And I think it harkens back to that rite of passage as a young boy, grows up to be a man, and he's asked to become a leader. He's asked to struggle, to sacrifice. Whereas there are different cultures, New Guinea and New Zealand, where females have also taken on tattooing. However, they do it in a different part of the body. Males are predominantly face or arms or neck, where others can see. It's a visual cue to say, I have gone through this, I've survived, I'm now an adult. Women do it on the legs, where it's personal and it's more of a pattern. And that really stems from a rite of passage to childbirth and to becoming a woman and to becoming a wife and a mother. And recently, tattooing has become more in the female realm of art making. Just doing the show and interviewing tattoo artists around town, Karen Slafter, who is a phenomenal artist, Megan Emery. These women have embraced their femininity through a very male-dominant art form. And it's a very westernized type of art form now, but I really believe that all of the women in the show were very strong, and they embraced that. And they understood that, yes, it wasn't a male form, but
Right.
now it's changing. And that's what's
Yeah.
exciting about tattoos, is because the tattoos that we see now are not the tattoos even a decade ago that
Sure.
are, you know, that are relevant.
And your art is not what it was before you did these pieces.
Oh,
It's-
certainly no.
So what's
Heavily
happened
influenced.
to your art and your journey now, Joyce?
The tattoo pieces have influenced my artistic journey in ways that I could have never anticipated. In terms of opportunities to move out into the world with my work. Also, they have provided an opportunity for me to think conceptually. I'm able within one piece to deal with a concept in a way that I could never do in sculpture or painting alone.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of reactions, I've asked Christina this question, but what kind of reactions have you gotten to these two pieces you did? What have people said to you?
It's been wonderful. It has created the opportunity for a dialogue with people that I could never have anticipated, because there's something about, maybe it's because they're so tangible. Maybe it's because they're three-dimensional and there's iconography and literary elements on them, that people move around them, they read them, they are more engaged with them than they would be with a sculpture or a painting alone. And they ask questions, or they feel things that somehow it elicits something within them that, you know, that they share with me. I mean, it's been very, very rewarding. Very rewarding
What
work.
kind of questions do they ask?
What does this mean? Or I feel that way, or this reminds me of, or I had a dream, or
You know, and it strikes me then that so much of our own personal and corporate faith journeys are all about those same questions, aren't they?
yes,
What does
Definitely.
this mean? Tell me your story. What's going on with you?
That's the basis of art.
Yeah,
People trying to figure that out
the
in
basis
different mediums.
of art and the basis of life,
That's right.
which you two have illustrated so well today.
well,
So thank you so much, Joyce and Christina. It's been a pleasure to have you all. Look forward to some more conversations about tattoo art and artistry. And so good to have you here today on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Bobby, start the music!
Molly Shannon returns to host Saturday Night Live, and she's bringing some friends.
Very confusing show, T.
Plus music by Linkin Park.
It is over.
Saturday Night Live, tonight on NBC.